Please welcome Gareth Lock.
Thank you very much, Randy. Aptly described situational. So my background, I spent 25 years in the Royal Air Force as a flight instructor, flight commander, teaching tactical low flying in Hercules transport aircraft. And during my career, human factors and crew resource management is just what makes aviation safe in the way it is. And I'm going to talk about one of the key facets of this, which is situational awareness, which is often described in the training materials, but it doesn't go into a lot of detail about what it really is, and most importantly, how to improve it, and how do you lose it, or we'll come into that in a bit more detail. So I'm going to show a video clip to start with, or actually a couple of video clips, and I want you to tell me what they've got in common. So what I can tell you right now is you had a trouble focusing on both those video clips at the same time. And you're trying to scan between them, and that's one of the things that happens in the real world. We've got lots of things happening. These were both surprises, and I'll play them individually now. So the first guy, here we go, really important task, I've got to catch a beer can. Oh, I've dropped it. Okay. Boom. Who put the post there? Now, depending on how you put this out there, you get the stupid or this is how attention works. They weren't expecting that to be there. The same for the driver in the bottom, and the good thing is that she survived and the child that was in the car survived as well. And they were surprised. Why would somebody park vehicles in the slip road? That was an unexpected activity. Now, from her point of view, overtaking and then going, there's my junction, I've got to go across now, and then her view of the future was obscured by the vehicle in front. Aviation, this is one of the seminal events, major events in aviation, was United Airlines 173. They crashed when they ran out of fuel on the way into an airfield. The reason why that happened, you think, pilot error. But the captain, the co-pilot, and the flight engineer were all busy trying to sort out an errant light. They put the landing gear down, there was a flashing light, and like, is the gear down and locked, or is there a problem with the landing gear? And the captain was basically orbiting, and they were trying to solve the problem where they could actually land it. There were other aircraft who got in for their approaches, which he'd given priority to, and he could have quite easily made a mayday call or a pan call to say, we need to take priority. His co-pilot and flight engineer were giving him little hints that doesn't quite look right. Have we got enough fuel? And one of the bits that they picked up in aviation in the 70s was lack of assertion training. The co-pilots or the inexperienced flight engineers or other pilots to be able to speak up and say, there is something wrong, we need to speak up about this. And there were a number of other major events. They recognized that it wasn't just pilot error. That was easy to pin on the pilot because they were the last person to touch it, but actually the pilots have got a vested interest in making sure that the aircraft flies safely too. And then we talk about diving as an example here with West Skies. The unexpected happened. There were a whole bunch of factors that led to his fatality. It's not just one little thing. There was inattention, and it's easy, as we'll go through this, to say they didn't pay attention or they needed to pay more attention to what's going on. And what I'm going to show through this presentation is that attention isn't that easy to define, and you can't just say to somebody, pay more attention. It's a finite capacity, and it's pointing somewhere. So this framework comes from a paper that I co-wrote for the Journal of Thoracic Disease. And I just changed the pictures from healthcare to diving. So we talk about outcomes being a function of technical skills. From a surgeon's point of view, suturing, incision, what they're doing. In terms of diving, propulsion, buoyancy, line laying, shooting video, those are all technical skills. And that's where we spend a lot of the time developing that in the training courses. In fact, Randy talked about it earlier this morning with his presentation. But actually, it's not just the technical skills, it's the context. How well do you fit into that environment? How complex is the task? How much mental overhead does it take for that? Talking about equipment design. Is it designed to help people succeed, or is it designed to help people fail? There's a concept called the Norman door, where you have a pull handle on the inside of a push door, and you intuitively walk up to it, you grab it, and you pull it, and the door doesn't go anywhere. Oh, it's one of those. The whole book written about user experience, user design. There are lots of things in the diving world that are just like that. Then we'll talk about randomness or luck. And this concept comes from the fact that, so we have a decompression risk made up number, 1 in 10,000 dives. Do you know what the likelihood for you is of having decompression sickness? If it happens to you, you consider it's unlucky or lucky. So the randomness bit is when we look at the big community, and the luck bit is individual. Sometimes your numbers are not up for that day. And then we talk about a lot of the work that I do in non-technical skills of crew resource management. Decision making, situational awareness, communications, teamwork, leadership and followership, and understanding what those contribute as interdependent set of skills and how they can be impacted by stress and fatigue, because you may have awesome technical skills, it's your lucky day, but actually if you're not paying attention to what's going on, it will all go horribly wrong. And these aren't simple additive equation, it's multiplication. So you could end up with 0 down here, and this might be awesome, but actually you end up with an accident or an incident. So a lot of what we do in diving we consider to be risk management. And those who are in a professional job that does risk management, these sorts of matrices are probably used all the time. And we talk about severity and probability. And all honesty, how do you work out the probability of an event happening for the work that you do in risk management? And I can pretty much guarantee most people, wet finger in the air. In diving, we don't have really accurate numbers to make up that risk equation, either the top or the bottom. What we have is actually we're managing uncertainty. And uncertainty is managed based on emotions, biases, mental shortcuts. So actually we're not very good at this risk management process. What we look at is some of the biases involved in how we make those decisions. And that could be recency bias. When was the last time you locked your keys inside the house? Well actually, as you were very close to that event afterwards, you make sure you check your pockets before you go out. That if you run out of gas on a dive or you get very low, then you pay more attention to it because it's in your mind and you can recall it. But as time goes on, that drifts and we don't think it's as important as it should be. The Dunning-Kruger effect, and this is something that Randy touched on earlier again this morning, you don't know what you don't know, and even worse, you don't know that you don't know. You are incompetent and unaware. And everybody has this. It's not just incompetent people, it's everybody. You make gambles at the start of the day, you win, great, I can carry on betting and it'll be okay. Or you get to the end of the day and you're losing more and you're willing to take bigger bets. So you get closer to a dive, the weather's poor, it's a really great time, you haven't got much opportunity to go diving, and you'll carry that risk. You'll think it's okay. I mean, what could go wrong? The last time I did this, it was okay. So we push those limits without realizing it. As an example, in the general aviation community in the States, on average every year between 350 and 400 people die in light aircraft crashes like this. But they happen in 1s and 2s. If you crash 3 regional jets carrying 150 people each on them, there would be an outcry. And yet it's the same number of people. In diving, we don't hear about these things because they're small numbers. And actually we're not very good about talking about the events because we want to pick up stones and throw them at people for being stupid. And you know, actually, we're all human from that perspective. Just looking at these numbers here, we are really bad at judging big numbers. So 1 million seconds, that's 11 days in a bit. 1 billion seconds, well, that's 31 years. 1 trillion seconds, that's 31,000 years. The risk of a fatality in diving based on UK figures is 1 in 200,000 dives. Well, that may as well be 1 in infinity, because I'm never going to do 200,000 dives, so that risk doesn't apply to me. We're rubbish at judging these sorts of numbers. So this is a colleague of mine who works in aviation. If all accidents could be prevented, and that's true, but only if we had the ability to predict with 100% certainty what the immediate future will hold. We can't do that, so we have to take a gamble on the few probable futures against all the billions of possible outcomes. Crossing the road, that's okay. I've done that loads of times, but there's still a possibility. So when Strikey said, when the author dies, I've got a 100% probability of dying at some point. It will happen in the future. So what I'm going to try and do is manage that. Now, we often talk about complacency and assumptions. Now, from my view, there is this trade-off. If things go really well, we call it efficiency. If we call it goes wrong, we call it complacency. So we're often judging based on outcomes. We often say, assumptions make an ass out of you and me. But assumptions are what make the world go round. Because we can't apply lots of mental energy to everything that's going on, so we take these mental shortcuts. And this is from a book, Third Generation Safety, looking at the science of what happens in your head in decision making. So our level of attention when you're in the learning area is really high. When you first start to learn to dive or drive or learn any new skill, you're spending a lot of time processing what you're doing. And then over time, as you become skilled, this unconscious competence, which happens over a period of time, it could be weeks, months, years, whatever. As you get more and more skilled, you start moving into automatic behavior, which means that actually, in this area here, we're not paying attention to what's going on unless we actively control that process. But we pay attention. And the only reason we pay attention is because we know we're fallible, that we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to try and change our attitudes. Because ultimately, we have a little prediction engine that sits inside our head, that's trying to guess what's going to happen in the future all the time. The same way that Duncan McCullough's quote, we're looking, what might happen, what might happen, what might happen. And when we have only little bits of information, we fill those gaps. We guess. And most of the time, those guesses are right. The difficulty is some of them, they're wrong, and they bite us in the bum. So we try and fill that gap as best we can with our assumptions about what's going to happen. Now, if we've never encountered a situation before, how are we ever going to predict it? Now, if I took this remote and dropped it, you've all got a mental model that's been validated by lots of experience, it will fall to the floor. But if I drop this, and it's hovered in the middle of the air, and sit there and go, wow, that isn't what I was expecting to happen. My model has got a mismatch between what's happening and the reality. And to a certain extent, that's what complacency is about. We forget that we need to cross-check our models all the time between our little prediction engine and what is happening in reality. And as an example of this, I'm going to show you 3 video clips. And there are some tasks on the screen which I want you to follow the tasks. I'm going to ask some questions at the end. And note, this is American football and not a soccer ball. That's meant for playing this match straight away. Okay, how many times the ball get passed? Shout out. 10. Okay, good. The answer was 10. How many jumps? 21, 20, any advances on that? Okay, the answer is 20. But they weren't the test. Those who've seen my class Who saw the colour change? Who noticed that that's in the swell? Okay, so I've got another question for you. Who's expecting a gorilla in the scene? There we go. So these sorts of videos have shown quite a lot to cover this concept called inattention blindness. We have a finite capacity to pay attention to what's going on. What's interesting? What takes our attention into that? Now, in this concept, you've also got mental models about what's going to happen in the real world. Why would that portable toilet change colour? Well, it wouldn't in the real world. And why would that basketball net disappear? Well, it wouldn't in the real world. So our little bits that we're not focusing on stuff, that we expect things to happen. And we'll come on to an example of a video where actually you can see, in hindsight, how easy it is to spot things going wrong, but in reality, they probably weren't looking for it. So I know that Randy's talk tomorrow is going to capture this with a lot more detail. In hindsight, we can spot these things really easily because we can join the dots. As we look back at an incident, we can go this. All those choices that they made, it's easy. Why didn't they see that it was going to end up as a bad outcome, an accident or an incident? But in reality, this is going to be difficult to do, just give me two hands. In reality, I'm here, I've got 4 choices, and I choose one of those. The next choice has 4 more options, 4 more options, 4 more options. Pretty quickly, you get to a point where you have no idea what's going to happen in the future. You're trying to fill those best gaps as best you can based on direct experience or stuff that you've learned from other people. The more emotional those experiences, the easier it is to look into the future about what's happening. But you're still guessing. But afterwards, you can join the dots and say, it was obvious it was going to happen. But in reality, if it was obvious, do you think they'd do it? Do you think they'd have that accident? No. Everybody's got a bit of self-preservation in them. Now, you will end up with the suicidal tendency people. They're the outliers, they don't count in this sort of environment. So we need to understand how situational awareness develops. And this is based on a model that was looked in aviation by a lady called Mika Ensley. And these 2 areas here is where a lot of the training materials talk about situational awareness. That ability to perceive, which is using your senses, and the ability to then process what does it mean. So the example here I give, you're diving a dry suit and you're stable at your stop, you're running a dry suit relatively tight, and then the dry suit starts to slacken off. And you think, oh, I can sense that through my pressure sensors in my skin. Now, that means that the pressure's going up. What does that mean? It must mean that either there's more gas going into the dry suit, or I'm ascending because the external pressure is dropping. So you sit there and go, right, now what? I need to do something about that, because if I don't dump the gas and get myself back down again, I will start to accelerate. The same thing happens to descending on your ear. You can feel that, you can put gas into a VCD, all of this stuff, you perceive some information, you process, what does it mean right now, and then that ability to project into the future. And the difference between novices and experts is the ability to project into the future. Because you've got mental models, you've got experience to say, this is what's going to happen in the future and I will do something about it. If you've never encountered that before, how would you know? It's like ordering food out here and you don't know how hot it's going to be. Because you've got no indication of what the spiciness is going to be. So we perceive, process and project the information, and this makes up the first part of the decision-making model, which is about gathering information, generating some options, and then selecting the best option. Now, this happens almost instantaneously based on your mental shortcuts, your biases. We then make a decision, we execute it, and then something happens in the real world. It changes, which hopefully we've picked up, we've processed, and then we're able to project into the future. This happens really quickly. We don't consciously think about this process. Now, what we can do at an individual level and also at a system level is improving that situational awareness. So in terms of individually, what can we do? building experience, positive or negatively. We know what works and what doesn't. Let's apply that. Training. Let's experience what's going on. But training is limited in what you can actually deliver in a class, because you've got a finite amount of time to do it. Now it's down to the instructor, agent, and the agency and the instructor standards to say, what is it you're going to teach? Most of that is about technical skills acquisition, as opposed to problem solving in complex environments, because there's a limit to what you can do from that point of view. What your goals and your targets are. If you're shooting video all the time, you're going to be looking through the viewfinder, the controller, whatever, and it's much more hard to see what's going on. If you're a novice diver, you're trying to work out how to control your buoyancy, all your attention is spent on that, and you don't see the big picture. The expectations from that point of view. So in the same way that the basketball disappeared or the net disappeared, what is going to happen in the future? If you're in an environment where you've got down currents, I've fortunately not been in one of those, but I don't know whether or not I'll be able to spot it until it's too late, when actually the bubbles start going down and you sit there going, what on earth is going on? My mental model is not matching the reality of the situation. So this all improves your decision-making, situational awareness at the individual level. At the system level, the bigger bit outside of you, then we talked about how to make things easy for you, and that could be improving the user interface. I went diving the other day with a Sunto Zoop, I don't know what it was, I borrowed a computer, got in the water and looked at the display and went, okay, I don't know what those numbers mean. Because I was looking at the dive time, and the big number that was being displayed was no decompression limit. So I'm sitting there, okay. It took me a little bit of time to work out what's going on, and while I'm doing that, I'm not paying attention to the bigger picture. User interface on rereaders, controllers. If you end up with a complex interface, then you can't pay attention to the bigger picture. If you've got task loading, mental task loading, cognitive loading, that could be on the task itself, or it could be stuff that you brought into the dive. And there's a case study in the book of a guy who was going through a divorce. Really, his mind was not in the right place. He wanted to go diving to get away from it all. And actually, he ended up nearly dying because there was no scrubber material in his rebreather, because he thought it was all in place. And you sit there and go, how stupid can you be? But actually, it's stuff that's taking his mind away from the tactic mind. Stress and fatigue. The more tired you get, the more likely you are to make mistakes. I'm chatting to Dorotto yesterday about the need to get decent sleep, so actually you remember and learn so you can reinforce the good things. Automation. The more you automate something, the harder it is to keep track. In your presentation, Jill, where you're talking about the augmented reality system, the more you trust an automated system, the more belief you have that it's perfect and it's not going to fail. And actually your training burden goes up for abnormal operations and not down. Because you're trusting this all the time, and then all of a sudden it throws a spanner in the works and you have to work out what the hell is going on. And that's where aviation is struggling at the moment. The recent crashes they've had is the pilots are completely unaware of what's going on because it's happened inside a black box. So if we understand that this is how situational awareness developed, we can look at a very simple concept of situational awareness, that ability to focus on what's important and or relevant. And if I just go, that, a lot of people will turn because that's what you expect to happen. So it's understanding that whilst being conscious of and taking into account the limitations of your focus attention. Now I'm going to show a video clip here which appeared online last year, and I've been asked a number of times, was this a training dive? It's like, no, this is a genuine dive as far as I know. Now the difficulty is you don't know what happened beforehand and you don't know what happened afterwards, other than the diver made it to the surface. Now if you understand how situational awareness works and your attention is built up, this is not particularly surprising if that person doesn't know what a panicking diver looks like. So I don't know if it's a instructor, a guide, or a dive master, and he's looking around, and he's now going to put the dive, got the communication, he's got the communication from one of the pair there, and then the attention goes back to the rest of them. Make sure everything's going on. Checks the gauge, make sure everything's going, and then notice that actually something's not quite right. So I don't know if she sustained any injuries or not. When this appeared, the community was split between idiot, need to be paying more attention. You could see what was going to happen there, only if you know what to look for. If you don't know what a panicking diver looks like leading up to that point, if the diver is panicked, you're on a hiding to nothing to try and stop what's going on. What we need to be doing is looking for the cues and clues that lead up to saying, that isn't quite right. But just because the camera sees it, it doesn't mean that the diver is actually noticing what's going on. They've got tasks that are going on, and we've got to look for the right things. So often we talk about this, you've got to pay more. Oh, sorry, Steve. The person who comes at, I don't know, we'll look at it at the end. So, you know, it's interesting, you pick up that, whether or not anybody else did, I don't know. I'll have a look, I haven't noticed it, because I've not been looking for it. So often we have this bit of, people need to pay more attention. Attention is a finite capacity. You can't pay more attention. What you can do is point it in the right direction. And actually, Michael, you might want to, there's 3 levels to this. So on the vertical, you've got the knowledge about the system. On the bottom, you've got time. And this comes from a book called The Field Guide to Human Error by Sidney Becker. And as an activity or an event progresses, your knowledge about the system that you're part of, the dive, the solving a problem, whatever, it gets greater and greater because you're collecting the information that's there. Now, as an external observer, when something goes wrong, this is what you think that person knows about you. Because they know what the outcome is, and they know it's a bad one, and you weren't paying attention, so you must not have known about what was going on. But in reality, this is what you collected the information, and this is what led to the event. This gap here, that's the final bit there, Michael. That gap is loss of situational awareness. You can't define loss of situational awareness in the event. Because you're there, you're only collecting the information. What you can do is you can point it somewhere else. So how do we go about improving situational awareness? Understand your limitations. Know what's interesting to you that's going to take your attention away. And that, from the research, is dangerous, important, pleasurable, or interesting. That point of view, if that's going to take your attention, the rest of the time, you're an autopilot and you're coasting, so you're not paying attention. Look for your specifics. What are the gorillas? What are the bits that are going to catch you out? Look for those. Have a sense of chronic unease. What is going to go wrong on this dive? Success in the past is no guarantee of success in the future. Try and build a 5-minute habit. Check your gas, depth, time, where people are, where you are on the dive. Get really well practiced at this, because ultimately it becomes autopilot. You start going every 5 minutes, you don't even think about it, you go, oh, okay. But then when you look at your gauges, or whatever it is, consciously take that information in. Don't just look at it and go, yep, and then you sit there and go, what was the gas? I have no idea. Use debriefs, and this is a format that I've developed for classes. Talk about what you saw on the dive. I can see some of my students just smiling, because actually, even on a recent class, nothing to do with me, but the value of a debrief to understand what worked, what you need to improve on, and what people saw and why it made sense. If we debrief the dive, we can learn from each other. Ask the right questions. So you get to keep the money if you find the pot.
Let's go. You did not just do that.
For the causes behind incidents and accidents, or why events happen in the way they do, make sure you look for the right information. What I do, and Strikey touched on this, is I run training programs that look at human factors and non-technical skills, crew resource management, taking stuff from aviation and applying it to the diving community. And I've got a box of books there that I'm not going to take home back to the UK. They're on sale here or Amazon, and I also run online and face-to-face programs across the world. So on that note, I'll take some questions to recognise that safety is not the absence of accidents or incidents. It's the presence of barriers and defences and capacity for the system to fail safely. We will make errors. We will make mistakes. Let's design systems to actually fail safely from that point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.